my name is Lilith and welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to talk about some general art school advice and things I wish I knew when I was a freshman at art school. I wrote down all the things I want to go over. As you can see, it's very chaotic, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to cover everything. There is a very thin line dividing the personal from the professional when it comes to visual art. This is more of a advice to my younger self, if you will. I think the most obvious point to start with would be the art part of art school. I feel sort of nostalgic thinking back to when I first started school. As a freshman, I was overconfident. I wanted to exceed the expectations of all of my professors. So I think I really masked a lot of my insecurities with my overconfidence because I was considered to be very good at art. Back in my small town high school, I went into this thinking that, I'm gonna be top of the class. I was definitely much more competitive. Well, the first thing that comes with art and style, I suppose, is all techniques come with practice. I really think I was so impatient with myself, especially the long studio hours. I did not anticipate just how exhausted my body would be sitting in a metal stool with no back, punching over a giant drawing board with my 18 by 24 charcoal, this and that. There were so many times I almost fell off my chair because I just could not stay awake. Another frustration I had in my first and second year, I didn't really understand the purpose of my assignments. When I graduate art school, I'm not going to be painting little squares or I'm not going to be drawing skeletons. I really felt like it was such a waste of time and money. My attitude was very immature and ungrateful. I didn't know what my purpose was anymore. I was so lost in the overwhelming workload that I forgot what it was I wanted to do once I got into the school. So much of learning happens outside of the studio. So much of learning happens outside of the classroom. And I didn't really think of it that way, especially the first half of my academic career. The word inspiration and style are two of my least favorite words because they sort of give this misconception of how a process should be like. I feel like the word inspiration sort of alludes to this instantaneous arrival of a new idea, whereas I think a lot of times ideas are very fractured and it takes a lot of personal decision to take up a specific pathway because it's sort of like a web, right? The visual part of the work, or what you output as a painting or drawing or sculpture, is only the tip, and so much of your process is submerged and invisible to the viewer at first glance. Only those that have been with you in studio, such as your faculty and your fellow students, can see just how much time and energy you've put into cultivating this idea. So the word inspiration makes it sound like it just sort of knocked on your front door and here it is, all complete and perfect, and that's definitely not the case. Slowing down and taking note of how this idea has been interpreted before. In today's day and age with internet, nearly endless way of archiving work, it's almost impossible to come up with something completely original. When you're finishing this drawing, you are making so many different references to potentially other writers, philosophers, thinkers, artists, and then improving upon that or rejecting that or arguing against it is not necessarily making something pretty, because that sort of pretty is very ephemeral. I am very process driven, and I think this came to me because of the time I spent working at the library, which leads to my next point. If I could go back and give myself some advice, I would say take advantage of the library instead of just defaulting to Instagram, Tumblr, Google Images for reference. I think the library offers so many catalogs and books that are just really hard to find nowadays, especially given financial restraints or time restraints. It's just like right there, you just go and it's already in front of you. If possible, finding work study or a part-time job in school is also very helpful because it forces you to be productive, or it forces you to have a schedule. And it's very rewarding because you get paid, you have a little allowance to buy good food or things that you like for the month. It definitely forces you to be more constrained schedule-wise. So you can't float around and do things the last minute. As far as working in studio versus at home, I know a lot of students prefer working at home because it's more comfortable. I find it more distracting, and I think I was more productive when I worked in studio. Learning how long it takes to set up and clean up is also a part of the process. I try to separate my leisure time from my work time, which means that I don't watch Netflix or YouTube when I work. I actually don't even really listen to music when I work. My ideal way of working is when I cannot sense how time is passing. Learning to respect the deadline but understanding the purpose of the assignment. Back then, I would often miss the point. I would sort of put in too much time. And when it comes to deadline management, I think something that really helps is having a planner, putting down the deadline a day before it's due. Sort of like trick my brain into thinking that everything is due a day prior, because that gives me a little bit of a cushion in case something goes wrong. Then I have a little bit of wiggle room and I don't necessarily need to stay up all night. As you progress in the semester, in which most semesters are crescendo, professors tend to give more rudimentary assignments the first half, and then the last quarter is when their expectations goes up by like 2 octaves, because they're like, okay, like you figured out how to do this, so now you have to impress me. Right when you feel like, oh, I'm kind of getting the hang of it, that's when they should start throwing more things at you until you feel overwhelmed again. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I can finish this. How am I gonna finish this by finals? And then you get to finals and then you finished it and you're like, I have no idea how I did that. If you're already pulling all-nighters the first half of the semester, it's gonna be really hard the second half, especially the last quarter. Understanding the instructor's pacing, abiding by that rhythm, you really don't have any excuses. Like if you didn't finish something, then you didn't finish it, and it's 100% your responsibility. I wrote here, you don't know anything yet. Okay, so because I was so overconfident going into university, I would always feel embarrassed whenever I didn't know the name of an artist or a director. 80% of the class knew who that person was and I didn't. And then I would have to like pretend like, yes. But like there's nothing wrong with not knowing. That's the whole point of being in school. You don't know anything. And then even after school, you still don't know anything. And then while you're figuring things out, like that's sort of your body of work. And I think that sort of arrives to a point of what now? One of my favorite resources to use is jstore.org. I'm not sure how many schools offer that. I have access through my RISD library card. Whenever I come across a name that I don't know, I would immediately look them up and I would see what others have written about this person, just so that I have a little more context in terms of maybe time period or one of the isms like modernism, neo-concretism, a little more context as to why did this movement happen, what was important for these people at the time, what were they speaking out against. So another thing I wanted to go over is love and relationship in art school. The thing is, if you're dating somebody who is not in art school, that person does not understand how much work you have. Because your personal life and your work life is very much one big blob at the moment, I would assume your relationship will inevitably bleed into your work. Whether or not that's a good thing is up to you. It could affect the logistics, for example. It could affect how much time you spend on your pieces, or it could affect the subject matter, encourage or discourage you from pursuing new ideas depending on your partner. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know what the secret is to balancing between art and relationships, but if I had a do-over, I definitely would prioritize myself more. Dating somebody who was also in art school meant that I ended up with no time for myself. Whenever I wasn't in class, I would just be with that person. And I was very happy at the time. I felt very fulfilled. I felt very comforted and safe. But I think energy-wise, I plateaued because I got too comfortable. My thoughts and my interests pretty much stayed the same for a long time. Balancing relationship with school is hard, and usually something's gotta give. When I was at RISD, I was in a long-distance relationship, and I think that relationship really suffered because I was just dedicating all of my time to senior year, to my show, to my studio, my portfolio, my resume. I had so much on my mind. My partner at the time felt like I didn't care about him, which I think is very hurtful for both parties. I think that just sort of meant I wasn't ready for a relationship, because at this point in my life, I really should be focusing on myself and figuring out what it is I want. I think timing is very important, and I guess personally I feel like I would rather wait until I meet the right person versus going into a relationship to see if it will work out. I've tried that a lot in the past. I feel like I have a very cursed love life And I think I mentioned this in the sister tag. I definitely am a hopeless romantic, and back then whenever I met somebody who made me feel a little different, I would just jump into it wholeheartedly and lose myself in that relationship. What I didn't realize was manifesting a body of work takes complete presence. So do you see how these two will conflict each other? Yes. I guess for this time in my life right now, my devotion towards my work, towards art, is more satisfying than my devotion towards a person. I'm sure that day will come when I meet somebody who is right for me, but at the moment, I finally learned after 5 years not to choose my romantic relationship over my work, because my work is myself. Another thing I think is important is learning to share your work. You will never feel ready for that initial first time push, you know, whether it be making a new website, making a new art account on Instagram. I remember thinking that I just wasn't very happy with my work, so I'm going to wait until I am satisfied with what I'm making, which sounds perfectly logical and acceptable. I did not make a website until my senior year at RISD because I was forced to. It was one of the graduation requirements. You had to have a website or else you won't get your diploma, so that's how I made my website. And I remember feeling super, I was so petrified because we had to project it in the classroom. Big projection of your website, and then all these other people are going to scrutinize over every little detail, like the typeface, how big the type is, if you have a grid, if you have endless scroll. I didn't know what I was doing. They were just so supportive, and all of their critiques were so necessary because as an artist, you have so many blind spots. You know, you're only human, so it's natural. But having someone else point out your blind spots, your tendencies, why do you always do things this way? Have you considered approaching it like this? There are definitely so many eye-opening moments that comes with sharing your work. And it's okay if it's always a work in progress, especially your first year. Come on. I think my first year, if I was looking at my peers' works, a lot of them already had art accounts and websites. I remember feeling incredibly intimidated and discouraged from making my own work once I saw what they were doing. It's oh man, why didn't I come up with that idea first? But I realized one day, what if I tried that? No, what if I tried this person's technique? What if I tried this person's sense of color? Once it's processed through my hand and my pattern of thinking, it will inevitably change. It's not going to be a carbon copy. It's so limiting if you're just trying to come up with originals all the time. First of all, it's a misconception. It's not possible to come up with something original. Everything you make is sourced and based and put into context in relationship with something else that already exists. If I could go back in time, I would also tell myself not to worry too much about friend groups or cliques. My first year was especially challenging because we did not have dorms. We did not have a common area where we could gather and socialize. It was just the campus and then the parking lot, you know, everybody had to drive cars. You couldn't go to art center if you can't drive. That's one of the crappy parts about the school, I think. Back then, I used to be so high energy. I think I really pushed myself to be very extroverted, to be very sociable, to be very laid back and just down for anything. But I would say my friendships now are very much one-on-one. My friends don't necessarily know each other. I just found that this is more comfortable for me. Leaving home for the first time, I think we all felt very lonely, but we didn't want to admit to it. But yeah, I think there was so much peer pressure. There were a lot of things that I wasn't exposed to in my small suburban town with my conservative Christian parents. FOMO, fear of missing out, is real and it's inevitable because you cannot be in two places at once. And art school is a place where things are just really fast-paced. There's a lot happening. There's a lot that you find out through word of mouth. And I think recognizing that you are the average of your friends, who you should keep in your life and who you shouldn't. I think my life especially, a lot of people come in and out very quickly. I tend to be the kind of person that burns the whole mountain, not just a bridge. I think learning where your boundaries are it's just a big umbrella arc that covers the entire college experience. I feel like I've kind of covered everything. Oh, okay. There was this competitiveness, who slept the least this week, you know? Maybe somebody in class is oh, I only slept 2 hours for the past 3 days, and everyone's wow, you're so good. What is that supposed to mean? I'm not really sure. But I was so trapped in that mindset. I would force myself to stay up and work with all these people who are also pulling all-nighters. But then as a group, we weren't very efficient. We weren't getting much done, you know? We would go out and get dinner, and then by the time we start working, it's already 11 p.m. Yeah, I think I definitely fell into that all-nighter culture. Like, this is what it means to be in art school, is to be dead all the time. I'm not sure how other schools are like, but my first year, I had 1 day off, so I had 4 days of classes and then 1 day off plus the weekend. Looking back now, I definitely would have designated 1 full day to myself to do something that is not work, because if you don't give yourself enough time off, it's going to bleed into your work time. And that's exactly what happened to me. Instead of giving myself the time off to relax and sort of recuperate because I deserve that time, I sort of saw it as I have 3 whole days to do all this work, which led to a lot of half working and half not working, a lot of distractions where I would have the assignment in front of me, but I'll be on my phone or I'll be on my DS. I played a lot of Animal Crossing at the time. Just anything that I could do to take my mind off the stress that was right in front of me, the unfinished work. If I had a do-over, I definitely would have pushed myself through 2 full days of work and then taking that 3rd day completely off, because I really need that time to stay sane. I wanted to go over mental health a little bit. That was sort of a big factor of my art school life. I was under the impression that my work was a direct reflection of my self-worth. I just always felt like no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't good enough. I wasn't enough, period. Instead of pushing myself to be perfect, pushing myself to not make mistakes, now I push myself to not give up on something and to try something new that makes me uncomfortable. Fear of failure is a redundant cycle in which growth is not produced, because the fear of failure sets up all these restrictions in which you're not learning when to take that leap of faith in yourself, in your abilities. Back then, no matter how many times I tried to tell myself in my head, I just really didn't believe it. I was always either living in the past or living in the future, through anxieties and worries, trying to predict the worst possible outcome and how to avoid that. I really wasn't fully satisfied with anything I produced. It was all very hectic and chaotic and wonderful in that way. When you're working on an assignment, you're doing it for yourself. You really are. My dedication and my devotion to my work is prioritizing myself, because no matter what I go through, no matter what challenges I may face in the future, my work is always going to be there for me. And it feels really good to see this part of myself that sort of only exists in the form of shapes and colors and textures. I'm just very happy, I think. So yeah, I know I have talked for way too long. My voice kind of hurts because I am constantly projecting. I want to know what sort of thoughts you're having right now in your life. Like, what chapter are you going through currently? What are you contemplating on in terms of your concept for art, maybe? Perhaps it's more personal things in your life that is interrupting your work. If you feel comfortable sharing with me, I would love to read them in the comments below. Whether you are an art student or not, I hope I can be here to support you and give you just that little extra bit of motivation. So in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day or night. Bye bye! Should I do another dance? You guys like my dances? Oh. I have so much to do. I just have to go do it right now. Right after this, I gotta go work. Always work, always working. There's so much to do all the time. Ugh. Stop procrastinating. Go do your thing. Go!